Am I still muted? Oh, great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Ronnie wants me muted. Hey, it's good to see you. You old timer? Thank you. That's good. That's good to know.
It was. He came to church this morning.
Oh, yeah?
It was good.
That's good. I'm really glad. I'm glad to hear that. You got your fan? All right. What are you guys being so weird about? Everyone, hey, everybody, what's up? It's Garrett. You knew that it was going to start like this. This is called setting the tone. All right? we successfully said it. We'll wait a little bit. You know, we have till 5. I'm sure everybody will. Oh, it's 5. Wow. A joke. Listen, I'm not much of a jokester. I'm a pretty serious guy. So, does it matter how much wiggle room do I have here in terms of moving left to right? Is this okay? Is this okay? Right here is good? It's unsettling. That's good to know. I want this to be like, you know that show with, Jeff Winger, but it's not Community, but whenever he hosted that like talk show? No. All right. Clearly I'm speaking to too young of a group of individuals. Hi everybody. How's it going? Welcome to the stream. We'll start here in just a minute. In case you were wondering why we haven't started yet, it's because this is Focus and we don't start things on time. That's one. The axiom on time is late for a leader. Maybe like the real axiom is like on time is surprisingly early for Focus. So, yeah, there's the first joke of the night. Do we have a laugh track for that one? How long does it take? Okay, so it's going to be a little bit delayed. I'm going to have to cue the laugh track, make the joke real quick. All right, got it. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started here because, my goodness, I've got, plenty for us to try to get through today. So welcome to Pizza Theology. It is our second streamed Pizza Theology ever. We did one last semester. This one tonight is just going to be 2.5 hours. I'll try my very, very best to finish at 7 p.m., the lecture portion, so that we have the 30 minutes there at the end for a Q&A. So this Pizza Theology is about developing a theology of entertainment. And if you're following along in the packet, which, by the way, if you're looking for the packets, you can go to www.anyfocus.org/pizza theology, and that will give you access to the packet. And then as we go, and you guys have questions whenever I'm speaking, you're welcome to speak, or rather to write out your question in the Twitch chat, if that makes sense. Cool? All right, rock on. You guys are like way more distracting, by the way, than like a normal group. You're like having conversations and stuff over here. I'm about to kick you guys out of here. Okay, so table of contents, I'm going to let you guys know what it is that we're going to be doing here, and then we'll start making our way through it. But we're going to have an intro and then 3 separate sections there afterwards. I'll go through each one of those. But let me first introduce myself. I'm Garrett. For those of you that have never met me before, I get the feeling that there's probably more than any year before, there's probably a huge number of you that are like, who is this guy? And so I'm going to introduce myself really quickly so that we can kind of get past that formality. But my name is Garrett Davis. I've been a campus pastor here with Focus for something like 12, maybe 13-ish years, somewhere in that range. And I'm a student of Jesus. I'm a learner. I love reading and studying and thinking. And I'm also a professor. I happen to be a teacher at UT Dallas, and I teach sociology. And I've taught at college for something like, man, I should have had this stuff figured out. Probably like a little bit over a decade. I've been teaching college, and so I've taught sociology, and then more recently I've been teaching a class called Film and Society, and then also a class Culture, Media, and Society at UTD. And I think my skill sets lend themselves to a talk like this because of the fact that I'm a pastor in a college as well as a professor of sociology. So I get to study society, but then I also get to think about what it looks like to lead people to Jesus. And I hope that I can synthesize those two things well for you guys today. Because I really am a student of Scripture first and foremost, a student of Jesus first and foremost, and then secondarily a student of sociology, and I happen to teach it as well. That's, I guess, the kind of like why you should listen to me section. Not to say that I have a ton of credentials, but to say maybe I've got a little bit that are worth considering as we think through this. So we're going to start here with this section 1. If you're looking in your packet, it says intro, the debate is over, and in parentheses it says, and it shouldn't be. Have I explained everything I need to explain to them in terms of like stuff they need, packets? And yeah, I already said the packets. I did the website. I did. Okay, cool. Let me know if I forget anything. So this first section, the debate is over, and it shouldn't be. As I've thought about this subject of entertainment, I was excited to get to speak on it because very few people are thinking through the implications of this massive cultural shift that we're in. It's this foregone conclusion that we're going to use media and entertainment roughly the same as our culture uses it. And I'm certainly guilty of that, both in the present tense and in the past tense. I can remember pretty vividly in college, I loved watching UFC, and UFC was, extremely entertaining to me. And I remember Brandon, in a classic Brandon way, sending me an article about UFC being a blood sport and asking if Jesus would watch the UFC. And I'm like, why didn't you say it to my face, man? Just say it to my face, that it is sinful. But Brandon's like, I just wanted to send you the article. It's just something for you to think about. I'm like, yeah, thanks a lot. So I stopped watching UFC because I felt bad about it. And then it certainly hasn't stopped me from engaging in unhealthy activities and practices and entertainment. And I want to start by being vulnerable because this is not going to be a pizza theology where I sit from a high tower and cast stones upon the commoners who dare to use entertainment in an ungodly way. Because I have to admit, I've seen Game of Thrones, the whole thing. And I really liked it, and I think maybe I shouldn't have liked it. My excuse for being able to do something like that is that I fast-forwarded through all the sex scenes. So that sounds, what would Jesus do? He would watch Game of Thrones and fast-forward through all the sex scenes, so it would make him pretty godly. So obviously, I don't think that's the best thing. And here's the one that's very condemning. But I can feel the prejudgment already happening, so maybe lay off a little bit about this. But I have officially played something like 52 days of Fortnite. That's right, 52 days of Fortnite, which for those of you that are thinking about how the math cracks up to that, that's about an hour a day since it's been out, all right? So clearly, even if, we'll talk about hours and that whole breakdown later, but even if that was okay, is that something I wanted to ever spend that many days of my life doing? Apparently, yes. And it still is technically, but I'm working on it. I'm really trying to rein it in. And a note here, it's okay for us to be lighthearted about this and also for us to take it seriously. I want to try to strike a good balance where I'm vulnerable and open, and we as a staff are vulnerable and open with it. But it's a difficult topic, and nobody that I know of at least gets to claim the high ground. Just because you watch VeggieTales instead of Game of Thrones doesn't mean that you're somehow less guilty of all the different things you could be guilty of in regards to entertainment. But if we wish to grow, laughing at our own ridiculousness is a pretty imperative thing here. And I've had to laugh at my own ridiculousness pretty regularly. And it's with that spirit that I want to introduce to you a section of pizza theology that we're going to have a couple of. And I've asked that the pastors of Focus to share their dirty secrets with me and their confessions about their use of entertainment. And we're using names too. This is not anonymous. I had to get up here and tell you guys my dirty secrets, so I'm using their names, okay? They gave me permission for this, whether they realize it or not. I said it in the email. I said it, y'all. I said in the email, I'm going to use your names, okay? So here we go. I'm going to just do a couple of these sections throughout. We'll keep it lighthearted. Please, disclaimer, don't use this to shame your pastors, but rather perhaps maybe empathize with their plight and applaud their vulnerability. We'll start with one of my favorites, okay? So I'm going to speak on behalf of my staff and say my name is Blop, and then this is what I think. I don't know why my name is Blop. My name is Blop. All right, so the first one. My name is Shayla, and I like to watch people arguing in the comments about almost anything because I think it's funny. Love does not delight in evil, am I right? My name is Rhett, and I once played a DS game so much in one day that I could still hear the sound from the game when I turned the volume off. My name is Kristen, and I've spent so much time thinking about how WandaVision will impact the MCU that I've started dreaming about it. My name is Sirac, and I once watched season 1 of 24 on DVD in 24 hours. My name is Sarah, and I watch The Bachelor, and I'm afraid this pizza theology is going to convict me that I shouldn't. So yeah, we'll do a couple more of those. I'm sure there was a commotion from where you guys were at if you're watching with one of those people. I'm sure lots of finger pointing and laughing was going on. But, take it easy on each other. Let's get a drink here. There's a former Yale professor and current pastor named Wes Avram that was talking about this idea. There's an article. I have all my sources there at the end of the packet if you want to go back and check those. But Avram said, in regards to him thinking through entertainment, it became clear to me that in the largely white, upper middle class community in which I was a pastor, theological concerns raised by Christian thinkers and pastors didn't matter a whit. The debate was over. The new world had begun. There was no way to function without embracing the new world. So let's look at some initial questions that can help us begin to assess the landscape. And you can see that it's his quote, his idea that kind of led to some of these questions for sure. So the first one, and this is, I think, for those of you guys with the packet filler outers, I don't remember where I put the blanks, to be honest with you, but they're somewhere around they're somewhere around here, so maybe pay attention. You can talk to each other in the chat, I'm sure, if you get lost. The question is, how important is entertainment really? I can totally see people saying, Garrett, look at what's happening in the world. Look at what's happening with the massive snowstorms and the pandemic and the political and social upheaval happening in the country. Why is it that we're talking about entertainment here? And the answer is, I think, self-evident, but I'm going to have you guys do something before we start, okay? I'm going to have you each do an activity, all right? I'm going to give you about a minute or two to do this. And so what I want you to do is I want you to, on your little notes or wherever you're taking it, I want you to do a quick inventory of about how many hours a day you spend doing something that resembles entertainment. So some categories would include looking at your phone on social media, watching videos on YouTube. You could be, reading some news articles, because news articles are certainly more entertainment than they are news in most cases. Listening to podcasts, watching television or streaming shows, all those things. Think about, just try to ballpark your average amount of time that you're spending a day on streaming or on your phone or on some kind of media or entertainment, all right? This is not counting what we call analog sources like books. We'll just leave that out for now, even though that is certainly a form of entertainment. Okay? Do that now. I'll give you a second. Okay, so we're going to look at these a little bit more in depth, but I did want to point out that we usually go pretty easy on ourselves and things like this. Like we say stuff like, oh, it's just because of COVID. Like my numbers are just up this week because of the snowstorm. You know what I mean? We're like, oh yeah, surely I don't like to spend that much time on my phone. Like in a typical year, I definitely wouldn't have spent that much time on my phone. But in like around you, like right now, wherever you're watching, okay? This is what I want you to do. If you're watching with your core or if you're watching in focus or whatever, take a quick guess at what you think the average number of hours per day that an adult 18 plus spends on entertainment. An average number of hours per day that an adult 18 plus. I'm trying to picture everyone yelling. Everyone's yelling their answers. 6, 5, 8. Okay, everyone's done now. The real number is actually pretty staggering. On average, U.S. adults are spending about 12 hours a day connected to linear and digital media and almost 6 hours a day with video alone. Think about that for a moment. 12 hours a day. You might ask yourself, how can that even be possible? That doesn't even include a 9-hour workday. Well, my friends, people are accessing versions of entertainment while they're at work for the most part. Some of you are like, I know that's true. Also, those of you that do your homework while streaming something on television and occasionally looking up, more like occasionally looking down at what you're doing, but that counts as well. 12 hours a day, 18 plus. That's actually the information from the Nielsen Total Audience Report, if we want to put that graphic up, in case you guys are wondering. You can see there that it says actually 11 hours and 54 minutes. It has the different categories there, if you want to take a look at that. And again, this is a company, by the way, that makes their money by getting this data and giving it to different companies that are trying to sell things, that are trying to run apps and businesses alike, and they sell this information to companies so that they can use it. And they're like, hey guys, everything's going even better than it was last quarter. The numbers are up. Like, people are using more digital media. So if the question is, how important is entertainment really? How about the answer, it's the thing that we spend the very most time doing of anything at all. Isn't that crazy? In terms of like categories, whether it's sleep or work or school or whatever, as an average, it is literally the thing that we spend the most time doing as a culture. Okay, so how important is it? I would say very. All right, number 2 then. What are the theologians and Christian thinkers saying about it, is this next question. What are theologians and Christian thinkers saying about this? Well, I thought for sure whenever I sat down to start researching for this piece of theology, I thought I was going to find this massive body of literature from theologians speaking about the ramifications of entertainment in our culture, speaking about what the scripture would have to bear on entertainment, thinking about all kinds of different things, making assertions. But what I found was it was so quiet. There was almost nothing in the way of a modern theological book written to modern Christians, trying to minister to them in terms of what should be happening and what is happening with entertainment. There are plenty of journalists and Christian pastors and things like that are writing books. But I even bought some of them, and as I was reading them, I'm like, these are not theological treatises on them. This is just someone saying, this is what I do, and this is what you should do, and that's kind of it. And I'm like, yeah, but why should I do this stuff? Why should I put my phone down and do this thing instead of this other thing? It seemed arbitrary to me in many ways. But the lack of theological literature on this subject is pretty glaring. I even reached out to John Stackhouse Jr., who's a professor at Crandall University, and he actually did our winter camp probably like 2 or 3 years ago. That sound right? Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago. And I asked him, I said, hey, and this is a guy that he is steeped in modern theology, right? Like, he's a guy that if anyone would know, it's him. And I was like, hey, I'm looking for this, this kind of material on entertainment. Do you know of anybody that has this, or do you know anybody that's written something? And he goes, actually, no, I don't. It needs to be. It's scary how quiet our field is on it. And I'm like, oh no, what is happening? It's the thing we're spending the most time doing. And we don't have much, good, healthy literature on it in terms of theology. Why? What's the problem? Is the argument over? Is the debate already over? And it shouldn't be, is the question. So the effect that this has on our minds and our hearts, it needs to be considered, and we need theologians and we need pastors to be thinking about this. We need people in congregations to be thinking about this. It's shocking how little modern scholarship talks about entertainment, and it's a certain sign that we're not thinking critically about it enough, and we're not critically examining it enough. So this third question, what framework will we use to assess entertainment? Because this is the big question, right? Am I just going to get up tonight and be like, hey guys, entertainment's bad, we all feel it, so let's do less of it? That's actually not what I'm planning on doing, by the way. I want to actually ask some difficult questions and ask how should we engage with it. In fact, Wes Abram, that same former professor of Yale and pastor, he said, do we resist it with the hope of preserving an older memory? Do we harness it with the sure confidence that it is a gift from God? Or do we find ways to critically but realistically engage? And as you can tell, for those of you more adept students, you can tell that is in fact the way that I've chosen to to frame our conversation today. If you looked at the table of contents, it has intro, and then part 2 is to retain, as in keep it. It's a gift from God. Part 3 is resist, as in push it away. It's evil and the world does it. And then part 4 is to rethink it, or as he says, to critically but realistically engage in it. So it's within that framework that we're going to be talking about quality and quantity as 2 particular points of interest within that framework of retaining, resisting, and rethinking. And this 4th question that we have to ask is pretty simple. How can we hope to achieve anything here? What am I hoping to achieve by talking about entertainment and a theology of entertainment? It certainly seems like it's too much of a crapshoot to even begin to put our finger on something that could be useful, some solid rule, some idea of logic that might be helpful for us with figuring this out. But it's actually not true. I think we, in general, have a really hard time finding balance. I find that some Christians secretly long to be told that all entertainment is evil, and they basically need to become practicing monks. Others secretly long to be told that it's all well and good so that they don't have to think critically about it at all. My plan tonight is not to try to convince you that we shouldn't have anything to do with entertainment. Rather, it is simply to reopen the debate about it and then frame it the best I can, because as far as I can tell, the debate is all but closed. In short, what I want from us tonight is to shift from uncritical acceptance to critical examination. I'm going to say that again. In short, I want us to shift from uncritical acceptance of whatever our culture is telling us about entertainment, and I want us to critically examine it. Note that what that does not mean is that we go from liking it to hating it, because we're far too easily convinced to swing wildly to one side or the other. We're so all or nothing because it's so much easier than balance. I'm not sure if you've noticed that. People are like, I'm just going to do this. And, if they sense this inkling that social media could be bad for them, they're like, I'm going to go off social media for the rest of my life, or I'm going to take a 6-month hiatus from it, and I need to make sure I post it online before I do it. Like, I'm going to tell everyone because they're all going to notice I'm gone, like I'm missing. They're all going to be freaking out. They're going to be like, what the heck? Where are you? Like, we've missed you on Facebook or on Instagram. And guess what? What happens if you actually step away from it is nobody even notices. Nobody will even notice, even if you're important. But it is funny what we tell ourselves there. But we can't be all or nothing. I want to invite us, as we think about entertainment and a theology of entertainment, I want us to think tonight about what it looks to be balanced people of God. What does it look like to think of entertainment in a balanced way while considering the scriptures? I'm going to say a prayer for us. That was our intro. We're already done with it. I'm going to say a prayer for us, and then we'll get into what we have to go into tonight in terms of the other parts. Father, you are so good. We need your wisdom here. This is a subject that is difficult for us to reckon with. We need your wisdom. We know, Father, that you are good and that you have good designs for us. God, that you have good intentions for us and that your way is best. I pray that you would help us to be discerning people as to what that way is. We love you. We thank you. We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, I'm going to take a drink. My tea boy. Where's my tea boy? Jalen? I'm going to need some more tea here soon. Not yet, though, so hold on on that. That's right over there. Jalen, by the way, I don't know why he doesn't like me, but I'm working on him. All right, so part 2, retain. The question here is, what's the big deal? Some of you are like, I don't even know why we're doing a pizza theology over entertainment. Like, what's the big deal? So I'm going to try my best to really argue from all of these perspectives, not to play devil's advocate, but rather because some of these perspectives have some solid points that we need to think of. And if you think about a balance, like I just said, balance usually means there's things on both sides, that there's tension or weight on both sides that we have to pay attention to. In fact, so much of what's wrong with our world today is because most people don't realize the legitimate ideas that are present in other viewpoints. But anyway, that being said, so part 2 is retain. The first idea within this is people say, if it were a big deal, if entertainment were this big deal in Christianity and the Christian community, if it was a big deal, more people would be talking about it. So are we just trying to make problems where none exist? Do we just naturally want more to feel bad about? That's kind of the Christian way with sometimes is I'm just looking for things to feel bad about that I need to feel guilty about. That's not my goal tonight. The reality, though, is that not many of us consider entertainment to be that big a part of our lives, it essentially gets lumped into this category of free time. Now, this idea is important tonight, okay? This idea of free time being lumped together with entertainment. And I'm going to talk more about that later. But the reason that we don't think of entertainment so much in our lives, or we don't even think about, oh, what am I doing right now? Oh, I'm entertaining myself, or I'm seeking out entertainment. The reason we don't think of it is because it's such a foundational part of what it means to be American and what it means to be a part of our culture. And of course, the wide and the narrow road applies here, though. So Matthew 7:13 and following, Jesus says, "Wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." So it would stand to reason then that just because not many people are thinking about it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking about it. Because if what Jesus says is right, then the majority of people won't be thinking about very important things. And this might be one of those things. Mark Twain, who I often love to quote, because he's just got the best sense of humor of anybody that I've never met, he says, "Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect." When you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect. And that's what I'm inviting us into tonight, because I do feel like in general we're a part of the majority. But yeah, a lot of people are not talking about it. Perhaps then it is not a big deal. And that could, in fact, be the case. It might be like, hey, guys, why aren't we talking about aliens? Why aren't we, hey, in the church, we need to start talking about aliens, don't we? I'm talking about the ones that are, flying around in outer space. And you might be like, yeah, it's the broad road and the narrow road. Not many people know about it, so that's aliens for you, right? And you should be thinking about it. So I understand the fallacy of that line of argumentation. I'm aware of that. However, we should not, though, succumb to the other line of argumentation that says just because people are not generally thinking critically about it, that we should not either. Part 2 here. The argument goes something like this. It's legalistic to try and legislate free time. Isn't that legalistic to do that? To try to legislate how much time or what kind of entertainment people should be engaging in? Isn't that legalistic? And we love using the legalistic argument anytime it's like suggests that God's rule or God's way should infringe on my freedoms. We are big about that. We're like, well, that's legalism. Anytime that happens, it's legalism. However, the bigger question becomes, what does the scripture say about it, and what should we think about it? But the question is, what do we do with our free time? Oftentimes, we entertain ourselves. Think about that. So much so that I don't even really need to think about what I'm going to do with my free time. I need to rather think, how am I going to entertain myself? That's the real question during our free time, and it shouldn't be. So instead of the real question being, what should I do with my free time? The question, it bypasses that and goes straight to, how will I entertain myself? So much so that the two words, free time and entertainment, are basically the same thing ideologically for us. And so do we really want to get in the business of legislating free time, is how this argument goes? Isn't that legalism to legislate free time? If you want a fancy word for that, by the way, it's called conflating. The danger of conflating free time with entertainment, or treating the two things as one, is that it pushes out all the other many things, activities, stuff I could do that one might pursue, and it replaces those things with only entertainment, with only sources of entertainment. And certainly God does care about how I use my free time and my energy. In 1 Corinthians 19 through 20, Paul suggests that we were bought at a price and that we are not, in fact, our own. We don't belong to ourselves. We belong to God. And the legalism argument can be a convenient out for those who don't want to think critically about their own lives and their actions. I was in a Bible study just last week, and we were reading Matthew 25. I was reading with a group of guys that I'm in a Bible study with. Reading through Matthew 25, which for those of you that don't know, it's about this, Jesus saying, whenever you visited the sick and you took care of the poor and you helped out whoever the least of these, then you helped me out. And if you didn't, then you didn't do that. And I was amazed at my group's ability to take this thing that Jesus says, which is basically take care of people physically, like look after them, help them, treat them as if they are Jesus. I was amazed at our ability to take that and spiritualize it. Well, surely he's not saying you have to take care of these people. Surely he just means like that you should in your heart care about them, that it's really about care. And as a culture, Americans care far more about belief than they do about actions. But it's so true of ancient Israelites and also the first century Jews, the people who Jesus was speaking to, but also the group Jesus was a part of himself. When they said, when they talked about faith, they were talking about a set of actions that they did based on their belief. It wasn't purely about beliefs, but we've over-believed kind of these stuff. We've made stuff way too much about belief. And anytime we say, hey, maybe you should do this, or you should actually get to work on this thing, we're like, legalism. You can't do that. Part 3 here, or rather, the third section, says, if it isn't sinful, then what's the big deal? If it's not sinful, what's the big deal? This line of thinking goes something like, I have free time. My free time should be easy and pleasing to me, so I choose entertainment. God doesn't really mind what I do in my free time as long as it's not bad, because God's not always trying to micromanage me. That's the line of thinking when it comes to this whole idea of like, if it's not sinful, if it's not like I'm like, watching something really terrible, or I'm doing something that could hurt somebody with my entertainment. I'm not like, throwing rocks at passersby to be entertained, then it's fine. As long as it's not sinful, it's fine. And this is not a bad thought altogether. After all, one could hardly argue that the Bible makes clear what exactly I should be doing with my hours on a typical day. The question becomes, though, what is bad? And the majority of modern Christians don't think spending hours on entertainment or viewing bad things is a bad thing in and of itself. However, the question, what is bad, is not really the question for people that follow Jesus. That question should be, what is best? Not just like, what's bad? So with entertainment, oftentimes we're going with like is it bad if I watch this? But I wonder if the question instead should be something more along the lines of like, what would be best for me to use, or what was the best way to use my free time here? Not just merely what is and isn't sinful. As Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10:23, just because something is permissible doesn't mean that it's beneficial for us, right? So this fourth argument about retaining free time here, or retaining entertainment the way we currently have it. It says we have plenty of scriptures in the New Testament speaking about our freedoms as Christians. To name a few would be 1 Peter 2:16, where he says, live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Or John 8:36, so if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Or 2 Corinthians 3:17, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And you can tell yourself that as you're watching Game of Thrones to help you really feel good about doing it. In fact, though, one of the main criticisms the Pharisees had for Jesus was basically that he lived too freely, that he was a partier and a drunkard, which obviously is untrue, but it's indicative of how he spent his free time. So there's some legitimacy to this argument. The New Testament does talk a lot about our freedoms, Paul especially. In 1 Corinthians 8, Paul even seems to infer that freedom is a sign of maturity, and people that are weak in faith were less free, albeit he does say to use that freedom in a way that is considerate. The crux of this argument here, though, comes in the form of a question. For what reason does God permit our freedom? What reason do you think God has permitted you to have freedom? And if our answer revolves around our own happiness, we have to at least be skeptical of that, right? Like, you have to at least be skeptical. If you think God just permitted you freedom so that you could do whatever you wanted to and be happy, maybe there's a higher reason for that we'll evaluate later. All right, number 5. The scripture is full of people doing really bad, sometimes obscene things. Am I supposed to believe that my viewing of these things in media is somehow worse? Ooh, that's a good argument. I like that. Because you're reading the Bible and you're like, man, people are dying. People are getting killed. Some really rough stuff I'm not even going to bring up because it's obscene in our culture for me to bring up what it even says in the Bible, right? Like, it would offend you if I talked about some of the things that I desperately want to talk about right now, but I'm not going to. I will refrain. I am not Ronnie. So I'm not going to talk about all the things I could say here, all right? But leave that alone. The Bible has obscene things in it. We're not supposed to just avoid it, which is one of the problems I have with the whole VeggieTales community, but that's okay. We're not supposed to just avoid it just because it's got obscenity to it. So can't somebody basically watch bad things and condemn them? As long as you know right from wrong in media, then you should be able to consume it, or so the argument goes. Contrary to popular thought, there's not a very strong link between violent video games and aggression. That's something, again, I quoted later in terms of the sources. And we have to also point out that the majority of the folks that watch awful things aren't awful people doing those things. So we know how popular serial killer documentaries are on Netflix right now, but there hasn't been this massive spike in serial killers because of it, right? But again, is this the right question? Why don't we put up that second picture that we have, that Calvin and Hobbes comic? I don't know if you guys can read that. And honestly, I'm going to say I don't think I can read it from my notes either. But basically it goes something like this. It says like, violence in video games don't cause, aggression or anything like that. But it's like, does it cause like a lack of human empathy? Does it cause like a readiness to see violence and a bloodlust in our society? Yeah, that's not the point though. The key is to ask the right question, namely like, does it cause violence? So just because these video games don't cause violence, is that the same thing as saying like that these are good? Like these are the best things? The right question matters. Is the question, will people become awful people if they do these certain things? Or is the question, what will make us more like Jesus? What things do I consume? And like, what things are going to make me more like Jesus? Is maybe a better question to. Am I going too fast? Do you guys need me to slow down? Is this like over? Oh, good pace? Cool. Can I get some more tea, Jalen? That would be so helpful from you. Thanks, T-Boy. All right, so here, let me get this tea. Oh, I love you, Jalen. All right, so number 6. This is actually kind of my favorite argument in this whole section, okay? There's like a hot water nozzle, it's in the kitchen, and the tea's right there. Cool. All right, so number 6 is this. We don't want to be those Christians. And you guys know which Christians I'm talking about. Now, I don't want to step on the homeschoolers' feet here because I know there's plenty of you in the audience. I am not trying to upset you. But you know the Christians that we're talking about, the ones that like have like a family bubble, like a weird family bubble for themselves, and they avoid like all forms of popular entertainment. They're like, oh yeah, we weren't allowed to read Harry Potter books because they were witchcraft, and clearly I was going to become a witch if I read one of those. I just come from such a different background than that because like my dad apparently thought it was okay for me to watch Halloween when I was like 6 years old. So yeah, judge him for that if you want to. And also, full disclosure, I let Jack watch The Mandalorian, and I fast-forwarded any of the rough scenes, but he loved it. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it right. I'm thinking through this stuff, guys. I told you I'm not perfect. I'm trying to be vulnerable here. But honestly, those Christians have made it less cool to be a Christian, and we can't be relevant to a broken world without joining them in what they're doing at least a little. Right? Like if we look like those Christians, these are the ones that like they watched like that movie God Is Not Dead. Is that the name of it? God's Not Dead? I think that's what it's called. And they were like, man, like we got them there. Like we got the world, like we figured it out. It's kind of like triumphalistic Christian media that just paints Christians in these super positive lights and paints the world in this really depressive, negative light, which is not true. I can't stand those movies personally. Just like Jesus says something like this in John 17, we're called to be in the world, not of it. And we're also, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9:19, we're supposed to try to be all things to all people, or rather he tried to be all things to all people so that he could win some. So why would we make ourselves irrelevant by not sharing in this important cultural activity? If we think the culture spends 12 hours a day on entertainment, and this is a popular way of interacting with people socially, then why would we essentially cut ourselves off from that to be like wholly, apart from it? We know all of the people that grew up only being able to watch Bible Man and Veggie Tales, and we also know that they're dangerously incapable of relating to cultural current memes and shows. I say that with tongue in cheek, obviously. But then on the flip side of that, we are called to be lights on a hill, aren't we? We're supposed to be salt and light. We're supposed to be different, right? Like we're supposed to be holy, set apart. How do we balance that is the question here.
Somebody said to go a little bit slower.
Okay. Well, who knows if that person was right. Maybe everyone else is like, he's going too slow. I'm going to try to go a little bit slower. I'll try to pace it down a little bit. All right. Here's this last point. Okay, this last point here for this section of retain. There are important things I need to know that I learned through media. Important things I need to know that I learned through this form of entertainment. Like news, radio, etc. And if I don't know what's going on, how am I going to know how to think about it or what to do about it, etc.? That's the line of thinking goes. This is a pretty good point. I understand that if we don't have any sense of what's going on in the world, then we're going to be, we'll make ourselves irrelevant in a lot of different ways. If we just kind of abstain from everything so that we can, be holy, be in our VeggieTale, suits. I don't know if that's a thing. But the question that I have for us here is a difficult one, but one that I want you to grapple with. What do we really need to know? What do we really need to know? We live in this age where information across the world about what's going on in the world is available to us now. But just because it's available to us, does that mean we need to know it? We also can know at any point what's happening in our country, but do we really need to know it? If I know what's happening politically, or if I know that someone was murdered, or if I know about what's happening with the pandemic or the stock market or whatever, but I don't know what's going on in the life of my classmate, what have I gained? Think about that for a moment. What's your circle of what you know about? Of all the people's lives that are around you that you actually see face to face on a daily basis, what intimate details do you know about their lives because you've spent time actually trying to figure those things out rather than picking up your phone like I just did and dropping it and just looking at stuff. So someone who we don't know at all, we don't know what's going on in their life, they may be experiencing some massive amount of hurt or some big thing in their life, some big life event. And they're sitting next to us, and we know everything that's going on right now in culture. We know what's happening in terms of the most recent racial interaction between police and a black person, or we know the most recent thing that Donald Trump or that Joe Biden said to one another, or we know all the stuff that's going on. We know all the statistics about the pandemic. We know, everything that we've learned about the weather. We read about outages and that kind of stuff like that. We know all of these things, but what do we know about the people in the actual sphere we can influence, right? What if our news became something that was more about the people around us and less about all these things out in the world? Not to say that we shouldn't know anything. But whenever I think about this question, what do I really need to know? What do I think Jesus thinks I really need to know? The first thing that comes to mind is we really need to know what's going on in the lives of the people around us. And I think we probably substitute that very often for knowing what's happening out here, stuff that we can't do anything about. So that's something to be thinking about, all right? Okay, that section is done now. But before we move to this next section, we have another Confessions of a Focused Pastor segment. This is a good one. Do I have more too? I think so. At any rate, this is a good one. You guys are going to like this. Okay, Confessions of a Focused Pastor, Part 2. My name is Austin, and my wife and I spend half an hour in bed every night before going to sleep. She reads her books and betters herself. I scroll Facebook, shop for disc golf discs, and view houses on Zillow I could never afford. That's Austin. All right, next one. My name is Peter, and I usually play a video game on my phone while watching TV for maximum stimulation. I think we all do that. Have you noticed that? We're bored with the TV. It's not enough that we're watching a TV. We are dual screening. I'm going to go ahead and coin that. This is dual screening. Right? We're I am on my phone while I can't just do one thing. That's boring. My wife and I'm not going to say that we've gotten in fights about that, during movies. I'm why don't you watch the movie? And she's why does it matter? That's my fault, obviously. The next one, Confessions of a Focused Pastor. My name is Sandra, and I watched 22 Marvel movies in 1 month. Dude, Sandra, Jalen just hardcore judged you. You should have heard his response. Man, that was rough. You guys need to have a healthy conflict conversation after this. All right, The next one. My name is Danielle Rodriguez Clark, and I pick up my phone an average of 92 times a day. I don't even know if that's a lot, to be honest. I'm trying to think of me, and I'm like, I might be in the thousands. Like, I don't know. Like, 'cause I'm looking at the time pretty often. Like, I don't know why, but I always need to know the time. Also, I'm sure many of you guys have experienced this. Does anyone else have like the phantom rings in their pocket where they think their phone is ringing? My phone's always on silent, and so like they're so like ready to answer it that it's like a gun draw. As soon as they feel any form of vibration, they're like, oh, there's nobody. It's just the time. All right, next one. My name is Ashley, and I watched all the Harry Potter movies in 2 days over Christmas break. That is impressive. Very impressive. Here's this last one. Our names are Andrea, and Bridget. And over the last 2 days, we have binged on over 10 hours of America's Next Top Model, Cycle 21. And she said not to include these hashtags, but I'm going to include them for those of you that do watch America's Next Top Model, whatever that is. Hashtag Romeo is a witch. Hashtag bye-bye Denzel and Marjana. Hashtag Adam, please stop drinking, baby. Hashtag Linux, please start twerking, baby. Hashtag protect Will at all costs. I don't know what any of that means, but I'm sure it's like super funny to those of you that are like in the in crowd regarding that. All right. Yes, I did say twerk. That is in fact what I said, and I'm aware of what that means. Yeah. Hey, Jalen, can I have like a cup for this tea bag? I don't want to steep it too long. You know what I mean? Okay. Cool. Everyone do something for me real quick. Oh, thank you. Okay, so everybody do something for me real quick, all right? Stand up wherever you are. Give yourself a quick shake out, all right? Yep, shake out. Shake out the extremities. Get the blood flowing to all the parts of your body. Wake yourself up a little bit. Slap yourself in the face a few times. Don't slap your friend, though. Everyone stay distant from one another, all right? All right, you guys can sit down now. We're going to keep trying to chug away because I've heard the cries of my people. And what they've all said was, please don't do what we typically do and only leave like 10 minutes for the Q&A. They've all, like, everyone said that. They're like, are you going to like pretty much go till 7:15 or even 7 and only give us like a couple minutes? So I'm actively trying to finish before 7 so that we can leave time for the Q&A because I know you guys have questions. I know you like to ask those questions and you want me to address things that I perhaps did not address in this. So I am trying, okay? I'm going to do my best. All right, part 3. Resist the evils of entertainment. Okay? But before we would just like reject this position as too old to be helpful, we do need to spend some real time considering its strengths and weaknesses. Most of you probably thought this section was actually going to be this whole talk tonight. You probably thought I was going to like come up here and be like, here's what you got to do. You got to stop trying to look at stuff on YouTube. It's all bad. You gotta, stop your subscription to whatever. Anyway, that's not what I'm trying to say, but that is certainly one of the sides of the argument that we do need to spend some time thinking through. One of the most helpful books as I researched this stuff, I couldn't find almost anything on like modern theology of entertainment. However, I did find a book by David Bercot, I believe is his name, Bercot. It's there in the sources. And this is literally the title of it. Are you ready for this? What the Early Christians Believed About Entertainment. I was like, let's go. Finally, someone wrote a good piece of scholarly literature that I could use as a source to understanding what it is that the early church thought about entertainment. Because it's not like they didn't have entertainment. It's not like they just were like, well, we're in the first century. We just watch grass grow, or we work all day and then just sleep, and that's it. They did have forms of entertainment. However, it's not looking too good for us. This is a quote from that book, from David Bercot. He says, "It is clear that the early Christians outright rejected the 4 major secular forms of entertainment." It is clear that the early Christians outright rejected the 4 major secular forms of entertainment. That doesn't bode well for those of us that want to continue it, but here are the 4 major forms, by the way, of first century entertainment. You had chariot races and sporting events like wrestling and that kind of stuff. You had gladiator combats, problematic for a number of reasons. You had the theater, like plays, dramas, that kind of stuff. Maybe like the Grey's Anatomy of the first century, you might call it. The first one, by the way, to be fair, is like the NBA and the NFL of the first century. And then you had what's called banqueting, which was essentially like partying plus sex oftentimes. And so, yeah, that's kind of what they did for fun in the first century. Sports, gladiator combats, by the way, UFC, shout out. The theater, which was drama for your mama. And then banqueting, okay? There you go, partying. Now, Tertullian, who's an early church father, I said Tertullian. Tertullian, early church father, says this. This is a quote directly from him. Oh, this is a tough one. Among us, nothing is ever seen, said, or heard which has anything in common with the madness of the circus, the immodesty of the theater, the atrocities of the arena, and the useless exercises of the wrestling ground. Why do you take offense at us because we differ from you in regard to your pleasures? If we will not partake of your enjoyments, the loss is ours. If there be loss in the case, not yours. We reject what pleases you. Yikes. So it's pretty clear the early church did not do those things, and they opted for other forms of entertainment, such as eating together, spending time in each other's households, talking with one another. They did a number of different things. We'll talk about that some. But there is plenty that the early church did that we don't hold up as exemplary, right? I'm making sure to give counterpoints to all these points too, which you saw that I did in the last section. I want to be fair to do that here too. So I'll say it again. There is plenty that the early church did that we don't exactly hold up as being exemplary actions. For instance, see Paul's scathing letters to the churches in Corinth and Galatia. Just because the early church did something doesn't mean that it's the right thing or that we wholesale need to accept it. We should consider it, but it doesn't mean that we wholesale need to accept that as being the right way. Over the centuries, the Spirit has guided the church into new ways of thinking and practicing faith that has allowed the church to stay true to God's intent rather than to a strict set of dogmatic principles or practices. Note that I'm not saying God's message changes, nor that Scripture is obsolete. Rather, that our practices, things that are not explicitly mentioned in Scripture, may need to change depending on what ministers to people. So that's something to consider as we think about that. So it is true that the early church did not partake of popular forms of entertainment. And that is very true. We need to think about that. We need to let that have some weight in this argument for ourselves. But that doesn't necessarily make it the best or the right way. It should be another thing that we have to consider. Number two, part two of this argument against entertainment and using it the way that the world does. Christians should take seriously the call to be set apart. I mentioned this a little bit earlier about being salt and light in the city on a hill. The question for us becomes, have I taken seriously the call to be set apart from the world, from my culture, so much so that my definition of entertainment is vastly different from my culture's definition? Hebrews 12:14 says, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. But really, this idea of being holy or being set apart is everywhere in Scripture. We're called aliens and strangers. We're people that are supposed to be conspicuous and look different. Ask yourself the question, when Jesus showed up, was he basically the same as the people around him, or was he pretty different? Was Paul basically the same as people around him, or was he pretty different? All the men and women of the faith throughout all the centuries have looked pretty different from the culture around them. The question becomes, do you look pretty different from the culture around you? In any significant way, this might be an opportunity to do so. But I would assert that we look pretty dangerously similar to our culture when it comes to entertainment. A lot of folks in this camp of saying that entertainment is something that is pretty evil and we need to reject it, they think of the way that we use entertainment as a socially acceptable form of addiction. They point out that seeking entertainment is one of the first things that people do when they wake up. So, for instance, when you wake up, do you reach for your phone and start looking at social media or news or videos or messages or whatever? Is that the first thing that you do? They point out that that's a sign of an addictive behavior, that it's a compulsion that people don't think critically of anymore. And so with that, I said to myself, I wonder what the symptoms of addiction are and if they would match up well with what we were talking about in terms of entertainment. Listen to these symptoms The major symptoms of addiction from the Mayo Clinic. But instead of the word drugs, just put in like entertainment in your own mind. I'm going to use the word drug so I can quote it accurately, but use entertainment and see if it's true for you, okay? Feeling that you have to use the drug regularly, daily, or even several times a day. Taking larger amounts of the drug over a longer period of time than you intended. Making sure that you maintain a supply of the drug. In other words, keeping your phone charged. And then freaking out whenever they die. Being like, I don't know, I left my phone at home. What do I do? Spending money on the drug, even though you can't afford it. I like to think of all my students that have Hulu subscriptions and that are asking people to help them buy lunch. Yeah, Oof is right, my friend. We're like, it's a baseline reality that I need to have Hulu and Netflix subscriptions. And some of you that are like, I'm above that. I use my parents' subscriptions. I'm like, yeah, but would you buy it otherwise? Probably. Number 5, not meeting obligations and work responsibilities or cutting back on social or recreational activities because of drug use. We live in this culture that is becoming increasingly anxious about being in groups of people. And I can't help but think it's because we would opt for this personal form of entertainment and pleasure seeking rather than being in a group. Another addiction here, continuing to use the drug even though you know it's causing problems in your life. Many people know and are aware that they probably have some practices. Like when I ask my staff, give me your confessions about entertainment, they were pretty quick with them. They know that wasn't good that I did that thing. They're pretty aware of that. They know it's causing problems, and yet they've still done it. That's my problem too. Making sure to lump ourselves in this category. And then finally, failing in your attempts to stop using the drug. How many times have you told yourself, I'm going to cut back on this? Like, I'm going to get rid of this app from my phone, and then it just shows up again on your phone in a couple days or weeks. You're like, I'm totally going to get rid of this. I'm going to stop, binge watching Grey's Anatomy or whatever it is, and you do it anyway. Or, how many times have you done that? And again, this goes back to those Facebook posts where people are like, I'm taking a break. I'm taking a break. I'm totally stepping on toes here too. Like I know some of you like maybe just did that and you were like feeling really proud of yourself so that everyone knew that you were taking a break. Whatever, if that's good, you know what I mean? It's like you're taking a break. I would love to see people just stop doing things without announcing to the world that they're going to do it as if they gave a crap in the first place. Sorry, I'm going to hop off of that soapbox. But on the flip side, to all these things is ideas of addiction, this whole we're called to be set apart, and instead of being a part of this socially acceptable addiction, on the flip side, we're also called to be in the world, aren't we? Jesus consorted with sinners, and as mentioned before, was not known as a pious or dull sort. How can we go to the people and be set apart at the same time, though? How can we know what things require us to be with the world and which things require us to be apart from the world? Those are difficult questions to ask, but they are the questions we should be asking as we think about these things. All right, number 3. Christians should be living for something other than pleasure. This is a difficult one and it's an important one. And I think it's a particularly adept observation from this perspective of resisting entertainment. In 2 Timothy 3, starting in verse 2 and going through verse 5, this, by the way, this point says Christians should be living for something other than pleasure. Yeah. So Paul warns Timothy about the future course of humanity in 2 Timothy 3, 2 through 5. He says, "For people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, inhuman, implacable, slanderers, profligates, brutes, haters of God, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to the outward form of godliness but denying its power. Avoid them." That's really scathing. I found an article by a guy named Dale Kuyper. He was a pastor before passing away, and he had a pretty adept speech that he gave on it. And I wanted to quote a big section of the speech. I think it's in your packet, but I'm going to quote it. He says, our society, wealthy beyond compare, with free time almost beyond belief, is thoroughly hedonistic. A lover of pleasure is a hedonist. Hedonism is the moral philosophy that pleasure and happiness are the chief goal of human life. That is the religion according to which most people live to today. The rightness or wrongness of some activity is determined by whether it results in pleasure or in pain. If you get pleasure from something, do it. It's a good thing. If it causes you pain or discomfort, avoid it like the plague. It's bad or evil. Do you see the peril of being surrounded by people of that philosophy and outlook, of living in the midst of such a perverse generation? I will leave it to you to discover how much of that thinking controls you in your worldview and life view. That was extremely challenging to me. He's essentially saying our culture has become first and foremost lovers of pleasure, hedonists. That's what hedonism is. It's about pleasure. And it's pointing out that this whole point is about we should live for something other than pleasure, that the Christian faith is not one that is pleasure-seeking. It's not pain-seeking either, but it certainly puts an emphasis on pain and suffering and sacrifice as being a road to actually loving people well and loving God well. Now, we cannot be a part of both kingdoms. You will love one or hate the other, is what Jesus says about money and God. And I think it's true here in regards to pleasure or pain. It's not, again, that we're pain-seeking, but rather the problem is that we've become pleasure seekers by nature. We are trying to pursue pleasure at every turn. It's not just, can I eat food? It's which restaurant can provide me with the most food. In fact, how much time have you spent just searching for something to watch on Netflix? Because you're like, I need to be pleasured by this experience, and so I'm going to spend 30 minutes looking for a 30-minute show to watch. And everyone nods their head like, yep, I do that for sure. We do that because we are constantly pleasure-seeking. And again, let me draw this analogy again here. This analogy between free time and pleasure-seeking or entertainment, because it's the same thing. We just found out that entertainment is the main way to get this pleasure by entertaining ourselves. That this analogy, or rather this connection between free time and pleasure-seeking is troublesome. I think this viewpoint is pointing out to us. This connection between pleasure-seeking and avoiding pain is potent because if you constantly seek pleasure, think about this, for 12 hours of your day, you are seeking pleasure. How can you hope to be someone that appreciates pain the way that God seems to appreciate it? How can you be someone that wants to, or that appreciates suffering or sacrifice the way that God seems to appreciate it? How can you be going full bore in one direction and then slow down at points of the day and actually engage in pain in that way? And I can't also help, just a side note here, I can't help but think one of the reasons that we feel so busy all the time is that we're constantly filling our brains with stuff in terms of pleasure-seeking entertainment. And it's not actually that we're busy, it's that our minds are busied. They're frantic. It's much ado about nothing. But we can sense this, can't we? Can you sense this in your own heart? If you can't, by the way, I need to talk to you. You're better than me and the rest of us. I need to figure out how you tick. But this pleasure-seeking runs in I think, a very different direction. Hedonism runs in a very different direction than Christianity does. The more we seek pleasure in the form of entertainment, filling our hours and our days with it, the more we will be revulsed by pain, discomfort, sacrifice, and the like. But God is not against pleasure. This is the same God that created sex, I have to point out. This is the same God that is okay with wine, apparently. This is the same God that made beautiful sunsets, mountains that you could just stare at. Like, there is so much pleasure to be had in the world, but be careful that you're not someone that makes that the chief goal of your life. Too quickly, we can rotate from hedonism to asceticism, which is that whole like spiritual is good and the physical is bad. And we're not supposed to do that either. You're not supposed to be a hedonist, nor are you supposed to be the monk that is like all pleasure is bad. Like, that's not the point here. The ideal isn't a monastic life, it's Jesus's life. God made plenty of things in this world that we're invited to enjoy and take pleasure in. But the question should become for us, what is that balance? Am I balanced on the side of seeking pleasure? Or am I balanced on this side of seeking some sort of aesthetic lifestyle where I can't do anything, you know? And the fourth point of this section is that Christians can't consume what the world consumes and hope to be like Christ. This is a good one. It's a tough one. I didn't make these up, by the way. Well, I kind of did, but I used other sources. Christians can't consume what the world consumes and hope to be like Christ. I have not read this book, but Kent Hughes writes in this book called The Disciplines of a Godly Man, so I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying he had something good to say in it. Kent Hughes says, "It is impossible for any Christian who spends the bulk of his evenings, month after month, week after week, day in and day out, watching the major TV networks or contemporary videos to have a Christian mind. A biblical mental program cannot coexist with worldly programming." Let's put up that third graphic that we have. This is one done by Barna, and it's pointing out the actual, like that's a visual of time that's spent in an average, I believe, year with, I think the age range is, what does it say, 15 to 23-year-olds? Yeah. And you'll see that the bigger block is what? What is that? Yeah, but what is it? Like, what's that? Using screen media. And then you can see the bottom part is actually is reading scripture, isn't it? Taking in spiritual teaching. So that's even like going to church. If you're doing this right now, you're adding to that block on the bottom right corner. But look at that graphic for a second. Look at that graphic for a second. The big majority, and I think for a lot of us actually, this is like looking pretty good compared to what a lot of us actually experience. But look at how much we spend in the world and how little that we spend really grappling with the truths of God. How do we hope to have a life that's balanced whenever it seems that the balance is so askew here? In 2 Corinthians 6:14, Paul says, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness?" The idea here, even though Paul is talking about being yoked with unbelievers, in some ways you could say if we spend our time with entertainment the way the culture does, we are yoked together with unbelievers. He's basically saying, how can you treat these two things as if they're the same thing? How can you treat light and dark as the same? But the question becomes, am I supposed to spend my time nose in the Bible and praying with all or most of my free time? Should I spend 12 hours a day praying instead of with entertainment? Should I seek out more work so I don't have as much free time? I can get on board with not spending the bulk of my time with entertainment, but what am I supposed to do exactly? Have you noticed that, by the way, that's kind of like the big argument in your mind? If you have free time, you're sitting there and you're like, what else am I going to do? Well, I got to get on my phone. I got to do something. And that can be problematic. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break. I know for sure that the call and deep dive that's meeting right now is probably hungry for pizza. I think you're going to get it at some point here in the next 15, 20 minutes. But those of you that have pizza or those of you that have stuff that you brought in, you can feel free to do that now. What we're going to do is we're going to spend about 15 minutes. I've programmed in here about 15 minutes. Is that right? What's 624 minus 608? 16 minutes. Okay, perfect. Yes, 15 minutes on the nose. Let's go. Okay, so 15 minutes. You guys are going to get together in groups of 15 or 16? Not groups of 15 or 16. Get together in groups of 2 or 3, maybe 4, where you're at, socially distanced, okay? And you're going to share so far, the number one question you have from this so far. What's the number one question you have? And then secondly, what's the thing that stuck out the most to you personally, okay? Whenever you evaluate your own life, whenever you evaluate what you experience with entertainment, what's the thing that stuck out to you most personally? So a question you have, as well as that. And if you are not in a group physically, then I want you guys to interact with each other on the Twitch chat, I believe it's called these days. So we're going to do that for 15 minutes, and we will come back here, or rather you will come to the stream again to start the streaming at 6:24. Does this make sense? Excellent. 15 minutes. Go. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. You guys can come on back if you are still in conversation. I'm sure many of you are still stuffing your face. We have some big groups watching right now, so I want to ability to ask questions for the Q&A that's going to start in approximately 35 minutes. Ask questions in the chat. And if you're a part of one of those big groups, you can text a pastor in your group and make sure that they'll get the question to one of us. Do you want them to text you guys? You can text Darby or Court, whichever is who you, or Jalen technically as well. Darby, Court, or Jalen. So staff people, if you get texted by a student in one of your live watches a question, make sure that gets to Darby, Jalen, or Court. That's a good deal. So make sure that you're asking questions in there. That'll help us for our Q. And I will call it Q&R, question and response, not question and answer. I don't know if I have any good answers. Okay, let's do this last section. It is section 4, and I've titled it Rethink, Being Critical and Balanced. All right, being critical and balanced. This is a section where I'm going to try my very best to keep in mind those first two viewpoints, namely to retain and resist. I'm going to keep in mind those viewpoints, and I'm going to try to suggest to you some ideas that need to frame this debate and reopen it for each one of us, okay? So hopefully it can be helpful to that end. We need to be critical. Now, critical in most people's minds means like that we need to be negative, but that's not what I mean by critical. The most helpful definition that I found for critical in the sense that I mean it is exercising or involving careful judgment or judicious evaluation. I'm going to say that again. Exercising or involving careful judgment, judicious evaluation. Okay? So there are three primary ways that we need to be critical. And just so you guys know the layout of this next section, it is like the main point followed by a couple sub-points that explains that bigger point, okay? And the first one is we need to be critical by knowing and considering Jesus. By knowing Jesus and considering Jesus as we think about entertainment. Colossians 2:8 says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the universe, and not according to Christ." The key here is regularly matching up what we do with what Christ would do. It sounds very simple to say WWJD. It sounds very, very simple to say that, but it's actually pretty confusing. We have to match up what we think and what Christ thinks and actually compare and contrast them in our lives. So we ask ourselves the questions of, is Jesus in this? Would Jesus be entertained by this? And so on and so forth. As a side note, if you think he'd never pursue entertainment or would only watch Bible Man, why do you think that? Do you have reason to believe that he was prudish in that sense of the world? Charles Spurgeon says, "But, says one, are we not to have amusements? Yes, such amusements as you can take in the fear of God, do what Jesus would have done." The key here, and a key here, is actually knowing Jesus. Here's where a lot of this, it's problematic. It makes sense for me to be like, hey guys, just do what Jesus would do. Like think about his interactions with people. Think about all the different stories of Jesus, whether it's him responding to a Pharisee or him talking to someone that was caught in sin, or think about his interaction with the Greek Syrophoenician woman, or the woman that was at the well, or the woman that was caught in bleeding, or all these different things. Like I can call to mind those different things, but that wasn't by accident. I didn't infer those things. I had to read the scripture to know that. And where a lot of us are lacking in this ability to think about what it is Jesus would do is we don't know what Jesus already did do. We don't know what he would do because we don't know what he did do. And as a result, we need to know Jesus and know the scripture. And it also should beget a healthy prayer. So again, that point is to be critical by actually we need to be critical by knowing and considering Jesus. The next way we need to be critical is by evaluating both the message and the medium. Both the message and the medium. We have to be critical by evaluating the message and the medium. We need to grow in critically assessing what we're seeing, hearing, etc. We've become desensitized to the regular messages that we're receiving from the things that we are entertained by. We love it when Keanu kills 70 people in one film. We love it when that young couple who's in love finally has sex. Like what a beautiful moment that this young unmarried couple is having sex finally, or they kiss finally. And we're seemingly enthralled by these documentaries of serial killers, thinking that somehow it's okay to be entertained by these things. And for those of us that say, oh, I'm just learning something, I wonder if you'd feel the same way if it was your loved one that was murdered by that person. Would you enjoy watching that documentary about how they did that? Something is off here when we're entertained by things like this, when we're entertained by evil. And I do think, as a side note, reality television is especially ripe with some of this stuff. It's one thing to watch a fictionalized example of something, a fictionalized story, which doesn't necessarily make it good, but it is different certainly than watching real people's lives being broken or them making ungodly, unwise decisions that ruin their lives, and we're entertained by it. That says something about our heart with that. You know, the argument that I heard before, that was said earlier, which is the scripture of, being full of bad people doing really bad things, sometimes even obscene things, and are they not supposed to view those because they're not, worse? Well, no. You're supposed to believe there's a difference between being entertained by evil and being disgusted by it. Those are two things. So if I'm disgusted by the evil that I'm seeing and not entertained by it, what I seek out shows that disgust me in terms of the evil that's being displayed. That would be something. It seems to me that a part of the problem is that we're more entertained by evil in media than we are disgusted by it, and we're supposed to be discerning the difference between those two things. Example of what I mean by this, the bigger point of where we're supposed to be critical by evaluating the medium is, we use news and documentaries as sources of information, but they are essentially forms of entertainment in modern culture. I actually happened to be watching Anchorman 2 last night, which again, I don't know how much I can self-condemn in this talk, but I'm going to keep trying. But I was watching Anchorman 2, and the whole joke during this movie is that the news that actually gets people watching is the news that is, are we muted or something? Oh, we're cutting out? I wonder if it's because of me. I have 2 battery things on this still, so this should be fine. Okay. Should I keep going? Should I wait? What do you guys think? I'm just going to keep going and hope that we got some good lip readers. I'll really enunciate those things. This idea of watching news and documentaries as sources of information can be kind of troubling because in general, we're reading and listening to news as entertainment. Combining what is meant to be information with entertainment is a dangerous prospect, to say the least. It influences what is covered, it influences how it's covered, and make no mistake, it is a producer making something for a consumer, which means it's not first and foremost what it ought to be, which is just the most pertinent, the most factual, and the most objective sharing of information. So I think we have to be careful with news and documentaries. We have to just be critical about that. People are selling us something in the news. They're choosing what to cover based on what will get ratings and what will get viewership. And as such, it should be a tenuous thing for us to try to seek information from those sources. There's a book, a brand new book written by Brett McCracken. I haven't read it. I don't even know if it's come out to the public yet. It has now? Okay, finally came out. But I read an article about it and what he was suggesting. And it's a book called The Wisdom Pyramid. And he suggests that the pyramid, he suggests a wisdom pyramid, for a way to gain wisdom is this pyramid. And he says the most important way is the Bible. And then moving up the ladder of progressive kind of layers for wisdom sources is the church, nature, books, beauty like films, art, music, and so on. And then finally, the internet and social media. In other words, it should be the smallest place where we're getting our wisdom from. And the Bible should be the biggest one. And it suggests the range in between that. But oftentimes, I wonder if that's just flipped upside down. The main place that we're getting information is news media and social media and that kind of stuff. And that is a scary prospect to me. that we are doing that. A big part of the problem is that we feel that learning should always be entertaining. Let's put that fourth picture up if we can do that. In this next picture, I'm pretty sure, he says, like, can you make this more entertaining? And she says something like, education is not always entertaining. And he says, you may not always have entertainment. And he's like, wait a second, you think we might not have that as entertainment? Oftentimes, as a professor, I find that my students, in order to be engaged, need me to like go above and beyond to really capture them, rather than like that they're there to learn, and that perhaps oftentimes even learning and information is not primarily supposed to be entertaining to you in any way, shape, or form. That's, I know, crazy to assert. So we trade real education from good sources for entertaining drivel from bad sources. And we wonder why we're at such odds about what truth is. And if it can't be learned in a soundbite or a YouTube video, then it's not worth knowing. In other words, again, what I'm saying is the medium does in fact matter. How we come about this entertainment, how we come about what we're doing here is important. And then finally, in this section, we need to become critical by evaluating ourselves. This is a hard one. As a culture, we're so used to evaluating everybody else but ourselves. We want to evaluate what this person did. We want to talk about what that person did. We want to talk about what the culture is doing. We want to talk about the United States. We want to talk about the world. But we don't seem capable of even reflecting on our own faults, failures, imbalances, and things like that. And we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be critical of ourselves. We're supposed to be discerning and asking questions of ourselves here too. In all of this, we need to be good questioners of ourselves. We do too much without questioning. We need to ask ourselves questions like, why am I watching this? Am I doing this too much? Who could I talk to about this? What do my tastes in entertainment say about me as a person? Those kind of questions. And we need to reopen the debate about entertainment in our lives. We should stop waiting to be convicted on things. This whole attitude of, if I don't think about it, maybe it can slide under the radar for a while. And instead, we should be pursuing the truth in our lives. Not seeking out the truth is akin to living by lies. Are we still cutting out? Oh, we are? Okay, a little bit. Okay. Let me know if you guys need me to...
Put that on the stand.
This thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Putting it on the stand. It's been standed. Now what? Do you guys need me to do anything else? Okay. I'm just going to let you keep messing with it. But let me just finish that real quick. So we should stop waiting to be convicted on things. And again, that attitude is about, like, if I don't think about it, maybe it can slide under the radar for a while. And instead, we should be pursuing the truth in our lives. Not seeking out the truth is akin to living by lies. And as followers of Jesus, we can't afford to be afraid of the truth, especially the truth about ourselves. John Dyer is a dean of theology, professor at Dallas Theological Seminary, and he said, we need to examine not just our media intake, but also how the world we inhabit colors the way we read Scripture and the influences which Scriptures, and influences which Scriptures we prefer to read. I'm going to read that again because I butchered it. We need to examine not just our media intake, but also how the world we inhabit colors the way we read Scripture and influences which Scripture we prefer to read. All right, number 2 here in this rethink, the big kind of picture. There's only 4 of them, so we're on number 2 here. Number 2, we need to be balanced. It's not realistic or even desirable to cut entertainment altogether. I don't think that entertainment is an evil in and of itself. However, it is realistic to change the way that we do it, how much we do it, and why we do it. The question just becomes what ways we need to do those things. So the first way that we need to be balanced is we need to be balanced by considering and ordering the reasons that we seek entertainment. So I'll say it again. We need to be balanced by considering and ordering the reasons that we seek entertainment in the first place. I just can't see Jesus binge watching a TV show by himself. I can see him watching one with friends and laughing and talking. In fact, I'll tell you of a really good one you can watch. It's called Survivor. I'm not sure if you've seen it before, but you're welcome if you've never seen it before. It's a wonderful show that you can actually talk with the people around you as you watch it. It is a reality television show. I'm totally aware of that. There are some things that people do on there that are bad and need to be rebuffed, but there's also some really cool things people do on there. It's a weird mixture of people being really good and some being really bad. But it is interesting, and it's a great conversation kind of show. I love watching Survivor with my wife because we engage with one another as we watch it. We get to talk with one another and laugh together and have conversation. It's great. We have to think through our reasons for watching or for engaging in entertainment and making sure that they're good ones. So maybe there are some good reasons for entertainment, or maybe better reasons for entertainment, such as spending time, like meaningful relational time with people. Maybe education. Maybe you're on YouTube learning how to do woodworking or metalworking or whatever. Maybe you're learning about, I don't know, the deadliest snakes in the world. And maybe that's like a cool thing to learn about on YouTube. That's great. Education, you know? Perhaps it's relaxation, and that's okay too. There should be a priority list, though, in our mind in some form or fashion, a priority list of entertainment. For example, if you'd regularly watch your TV show, your specific show, instead of being with friends, that's probably a red flag. You've probably prioritized incorrectly. Like the show is more important than being with the people. It's something like here are bad, good, better, and best reasons to seek entertainment. We need a list like that in our lives. Like, what are the best ways that we engage with entertainment? Maybe we say like education and relationships or whatever. We need to have those and regularly be exhibiting that priority in our lives, I think. And then the second way we need to be balanced. By making some guidelines and structure around how much we engage in entertainment. We need to make some guidelines and structure about how much we engage in it. We need to sit down, each one of us, and prayerfully think about our goals regarding the time that we spend in doing these things, and then we need to try to accomplish them. I'm not saying be a time Nazi. I'm not saying be legalistic about it, and if you fail at it by an hour or a minute or something like that, that you need to really beat yourself up. I'm saying that we should all have some sense of parameters around how much time that we spend with entertainment. And if you don't have anything like that, you don't have any sense of how much time that you're spending doing things around entertainment, then you should probably create something like that in your life. Take a break here. Are we doing better on sound now? We stopped cutting out? Hey, way to go, Court. Solid stuff. No, I'm good on T. By the way, Jalen. Jalen gave me, you know how Jalen, my T-boy, homeboy brings me tea. And I'm like, why is it not hot? And he's like, I used hot water. I'm like, where'd you get the hot water? He's like, the sink. He put hot sink water in here and then made me steep my tea in it. And I drank that. I consumed that, man. Like that, you wronged me. That's something that, and he didn't even use the actual hot tap. I don't even want to talk about it. God, give me grace for Jalen. All right. Let's do the next one, okay? Number 3, about rethinking. We need to rethink free time. I've hit on this a handful of times, but we need to rethink free time. Each one of us needs to rethink this. The first way that we need to rethink it is by submitting it to the lordship of Christ. We need to rethink free time by submitting it to the lordship of Christ. We have to develop a proper mindset that places God as the Lord over all of our time. Not just the time we're working or going to church or school or whatever. I have found that there's this implicit attitude of staking a claim for my own free time, for myself. Like I stake a claim to that. And I become my own God when I do that. When we are in charge of our own free time and we don't even think about what God could want for us, we become our own gods. And that always spells disaster for humanity. And I think it's spelling disaster for our culture. What would it look like for us to really buy into the idea that our time belongs to God? And what might it change? If all of your time, especially your free time, if that belongs to God, what might that change if you really bought into that? A part of the problem here is that we think God is like a slave driver who's going to use up all of our time for himself, and you're not going to have any fun. You'll never be able to be entertained. But the irony is that he knows far better what we need than we do. And if we were to truly submit our free time and other time to him, he would give us far more abundant life and rest. I really believe that. If we submitted our free time to God, if we really believed that he had our best intentions in mind here, then I really believe that he would give us far more abundant life and rest. And I've experienced that. I've made it a practice to some nights, usually 1 or 2 nights a week, instead of going to, watch TV with my wife, instead of maybe going and playing Fortnite or something like that, my hour of Fortnite a day, instead of doing that kind of stuff, I sit down in my study, I think, I read, I pray, I write letters to people. I just spend some of that time. And I'm telling you, I feel so much more rejuvenated when I do that. I don't feel like I'm working. I don't feel like that. It's my free time, and I've used it to do something other than to seek pleasure or to just have fun and entertain myself. And that's important. So that might be a way that it could look for you. The second way that we need to rethink free time is we need to rethink free time by valuing things other than entertainment and pleasure. This is a simple one. We need to value something other than entertainment and pleasure. We have to value things, even things like empty space, which to us, we're like, what would I do if it's not nothing? Let me tell you what happens when you're doing nothing. You begin to think. I know this is a crazy idea, but you actually sometimes can think about what's going on in your heart and mind and life. You can begin to take those things to God. Empty space is important. Time to think, time to be alone, to just observe, to just kind of reflect upon what's happening in your life and in your heart and in the lives and hearts of the people around you, to pray, that kind of stuff. According to John Dyer's, that dean that I quoted earlier, he said, we should carefully curate what we consume, leaving space for contemplation. Curate means that we should be choosing very intentionally what we do and how we consume. And we should leave space for contemplation. Most people are terrified to spend 5 to 10 minutes alone with their thoughts. They need something. They need stimulus. They need something that's stimulating their minds constantly. And that is not a good state. That, if you know how earlier I was talking about addiction, that looks a ton like addiction to me. And we need to be aware of that. This whole question of what else would I do? Let me tell you, there's a lot of things you can do besides entertainment. But go discover some things. Figure it out. Maybe you like gardening, and you could do that. Not to say that it's necessarily better than entertainment, but you need to diversify your portfolio with free time. You really do. You got to do something other than pleasure seeking. Do something that even sometimes resemble work sometimes in your free time. Do things that look like play. Do things that are relational. Do other things besides just seeking out ways that you can be entertained, especially by a screen. There's so much out there. Go on walks, journal, draw, learn piano. Hey, Peter Young even learned woodworking. Who would have thought that guy would have gotten into woodworking? That's a guy that I'm pretty sure couldn't have changed an air filter 2 years ago. I love Peter, by the way. But now he's like making those cornhole sets. The guy's a woodworker, you know? I mean, he's even wearing plaid, you know? So he's got that going for him too. So he's learning woodworking. Learn something. There's so much you can do in this life. Don't be hampered and restricted by just a screen and by just these things that are constantly pleasure-seeking. There are things you can do with your free time besides that. And then finally, that we need to rethink free time by seeing that entertainment and rest are not the same things. Entertainment and rest are not the same things. Oftentimes, the line of thinking goes something like, well, I've got free time, which means that I need to probably rest. And the best way to rest is by seeking entertainment, and that's problematic. We need to take Sabbath more seriously. The main component of Sabbath is and rest is ceasing. It's stopping. Stop doing stuff. Stop seeking out pleasure. Stop seeking all these different things. When we continually pursue entertainment during our free time, we fail to stop. Again, John Dyer said, we see the ways information overload can lead to feelings of anxiety, stress, and powerlessness. Even though we realize this to some extent, McCracken says, we still crave perpetual novelty, which prevents us from thinking deeply and makes us more susceptible to things like fake news. And that is just it. We're filled with anxiety and stress and powerlessness, and we have all these different problems. We feel so busy, and you want to know why? It's because we're not resting, and because we think that resting is the same thing as entertainment and seeking entertainment. And we're shocked that we don't feel rested after we've just binge-watched TV shows over and over again, because that's not what real rest is. Real rest and real Sabbath is something that is deeper than that. It's a more settled approach to our use of free time in a restful way. And there's more on that. If you have questions about it, you guys can ask, but I'm going to keep going for the sake of time here. And then finally here, this last point in terms of what I think we need to do, my suggestions for how we rethink it. I think we need to reclaim what only the church can do. This came from that original the professor that I quoted earlier from Yale, Wes Avram. He says, Albert Borgman helped us to see The radical break between modern technology and pre-modern technology is rooted in the way technological culture steals the promises once held by the church to heal, to satisfy, to bond, and to give a future. I'm going to repeat that because I think it's a really important one. I say this one last for a reason. He says that that technological culture steals the promises once held by the church to heal, to satisfy, to bond, and to give a future. So what I mean by we need to reclaim what only the church can do is that we need to do so, and this is that first one, by re-emphasizing relationships over entertainment. We need to re-emphasize relationships over entertainment. And what I mean is, actually, those relationships can be far more entertaining than what we currently mean by entertainment. So I'm not saying that entertainment is the main thing to get rid of. I mean what we currently mean by entertainment, namely seeking this through media, videos, our phones, that kind of stuff. We need to reemphasize relationships over entertainment. People have turned to entertainment to fill voids that only real relationships can fill. Real relationships can only exist with people who understand the person who made relationships in the first place, Jesus. I don't mean that people can't have real relationships. Let me make sure I phrase that. People that are not Christians can have real relationships. What I mean is the fullness of a real relationship, namely self-sacrificing love that comes from knowing Jesus, is at its peak in those kind of relationships with people that know Jesus. So the suggestion is to be together more with people, actual people. Talk more to real people. Laugh more. When it's possible to fill free time with people time, do it. And I'm saying that as an introvert. Eat meals together, play together. Even if you're an introvert like me, you can be with people in meaningful and less intense ways. You can still be with a friend and watch a show with them without having to have like a huge conversation with them, but still be with them in that. This doesn't mean that you can't seek entertainment together. It just means we put an emphasis less on that entertainment and more on relationships, more on actual interactions. And then the second way that we need to reclaim what only the church can do, we need to do so by being people who invite others into alternatives. Did you catch that? The church, people in the church, should be inviting people into alternatives to just pursuing entertainment. People are doing that. But we're not creating alternatives because we're doing the same thing that they're doing. Instead of being with people, instead of creating alternatives where I'm like, hey, instead of watching this show for another 10 hours, what if I send a group text out to people and say, you guys want to go to the park and just throw the Frisbee around and hang out? Just go on a walk and talk, that kind of stuff. But instead, we keep doing the things that the culture does, and so the church can't do what it's meant to do. To the extent that the church, namely us, doesn't present alternatives to our uses of free time, then entertainment is going to continue to dominate our time and attention. And as mentioned, most people ask if they aren't being entertained by something, what else would I even do? And we have to give them something to do. We have to say, you would do this. Do you want to come do this thing that I'm inviting you to? Then perhaps people would be less likely to be like, what else would I do? And they would have things to do. We have to do that. Stop waiting for focus to put events into place and spend time with one another. Do things besides just staring at screens. We just have to invite people more. Let's go on walks. Let's sit down and just talk without a plan sometimes. You don't have to have a study in front of you or a plan or anything. Just sit on your porch and chill. UTD apartments have some good porches, man. I spent hours on those porches just hanging out and talking to people. Play ping pong together. Be someone who competes with Netflix and smartphones and the like as a viable alternative. Be an alternative to Netflix. Be an alternative to these other forms of lesser entertainment that are not necessarily bad, but rather we can become something that's an alternative and a more life-giving alternative to those things and still be entertained and still have fun. Let's all really embarrass ourselves and learn, skateboarding. You know how funny it would be to just have a group of guys that have never skateboarded before and they somehow procure one and they're like, hey, instead of watching TV all day independently in our own apartments, I'm going to invite these three guys and I'm like, none of us know skateboarding. Let's all try it and wear a helmet. But let's all just try it. Do things like that together. Experience real life together. In conclusion here, and then we'll move to our Q&R. I've very specifically not attempted to give you especially detailed directives regarding entertainment, such as do this thing every day or spend X number of hours here. And the reason I haven't done that is because we are free people living under the guidance of the Spirit. We are free people living under the guidance of the Spirit. On the other hand, I do believe that we have used that freedom as an excuse to neglect what God thinks of this area of the human experience, and that we must bring it under the lordship of Jesus. This is the thing our culture and we spend the most time doing, and we need to bring it under the lordship of Jesus. I hope that this framework will bless you and create some kind of structure for you to begin this debate in your own life. And I feel confident that if we can actually abide by it and think through these things, that we are going to be blessed and given more abundant life in Christ. I'm going to say a prayer for us, and then we'll have our Q&R. Father, you are so good, so loving, and so kind to us. Certainly, Father, we know that you've given us great freedom, and I pray for those of us with sensitive consciences that are beating ourselves up right now for how terrible of people that we are because of how much we seek entertainment. I pray that you would alleviate those consciences and instead replace them with hope and a desire to see what it is that you want for them in that area of their lives. Help them instead to see the invitation into more abundant and full life, into a balanced perspective about how we should take in entertainment. And I pray for those of us that have perhaps more of a worldly bent to our lives, God, that we haven't considered and we still aren't really considering doing anything differently. I pray, Father, that you would convict us in the ways that we need to be convicted, that you would help us to see things the way Jesus saw them, and that you would help us to live our lives for meaningful pursuits, to look differently than the culture, and to really try to do your will in this area. We love you so much. We thank you for how you blessed us, and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, I'll tell you what. Should we give them do you think they need 5 minutes of break to reset before we have our Q&R? Does that sound right to you guys? Let's do that. Ask all your questions in these 5 minutes. Have a little quick shakeout break, and I'm going to start this Q&R right at 7 p.m., and that's 4 minutes from now, okay? So 4 minutes from now at 7 p.m., we're going to start the Q&R, okay? Cool. Take a quick break, shake it out, go to the potty, talk to each other. You guys can meet me. Okay, I'm unmuted. So we had questions in the chat. We'll have them. Feel free to ask them, and we might have time for them, but Jalen is going to ask a question, and I'll repeat it to you so that you know which question that I'm asking or answering or responding to. All right,
Okay,
go for it.
the first question is, a lot of what you said applies to entertainment that involves screens and things. Would these principles also apply to playing sports, reading books, gardening?
Yeah, so Jalen said a lot of these things apply mostly that I'm talking about with entertainment apply to screens and things like that, but would they also apply to stuff like gardening, playing sports, and that kind of stuff? The answer is, I think the principles are maybe just helpful in terms of just thinking generally about the way I spend my time and about what that should look like. So I think it does apply to those things. However, I do think if you had to pin me to it, an order of operations, or rather priorities, I mentioned that before, reasons to be entertained, and there's a hierarchy. I don't think all forms of entertainment are the same. So playing board games with friends where I get to have meaningful conversation, yes, that's entertainment, but perhaps it's a more beneficial form of entertainment than me sitting by myself in my room watching the Office for the nth time, Kristen. And so, maybe that's what I'm suggesting. So I do think that it would be one thing if all you ever did was go play basketball all the time, and perhaps you'd need to balance it out. Balance is called for across the board. But I think in that specific case, then I think we have to know ourselves in this area and try to balance well. Does that answer that question, you think? You guys give me feedback, because otherwise I'm not going to pay attention. So whether it's answered the question, I might answer some different question. All right, go ahead.
How would you, what advice would you have for someone who has tried to limit their media consumption but has failed?
Yeah, what advice would I give to someone that has tried to limit their media consumption but has failed? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say try harder. I'm just joking. Just do it. Anybody know the meme that I'm referencing? Shia LaBeouf? Okay, sorry. But that being said, I think I think the main thing that I've seen is people make all these kind of decisions about media consumption and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like they're overly concerning themselves with the what rather than the why. And at least for me, I can't get behind a consistent mode of action unless I know why I'm doing it. And so I get the feeling that most people are just like, you know what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut media because I have this vague sense that it's bad. I think you'd do better off with probably journaling about praying and thinking through what are the reasons why you feel like you need to limit those things. And then getting on the same page with God about what those things are can really help you keep your what in place. The why keeps the what in place. If we only have the what, then it's just going to be like, well, I said I was going to do this thing, but I don't really know why. I'm just doing it because I had this vague sense that it wasn't good. So maybe the best advice I could give for someone that was repeatedly failing in that is to spend more time really trying to discern the why of what they're doing before they just go about doing the what thing. Yeah. All right. Is it working now? Can you guys hear Jalen? Jalen, say something. Can you spit some like some mad verses?
Some mad bars.
Yeah, mad bars. I forgot bars. Yeah. Is it on? Okay. Just ask the questions and then I'll keep responding until they get it to work. All right, go ahead.
How have you seen Christians give into this school of thought of hedonism?
Oh, how have I seen Christians given in the school of thought of hedonism? Yeah, in every way that the culture does. I'm sure that most people think like hedonism is like this word from their Greek studies class and that it doesn't apply to us today. But I would be remiss to not point out that Greek culture is probably the main culture that has influenced Western culture today in a lot of different ways. Even the way that we think about truth, the way we think about reality, that kind of stuff. Hedonism, namely this pursuit of pleasure, like making your life about the pursuit of happiness and pleasure. That's the American motto, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? It's in our Constitution, but the thing about it is that if you're a Christian, the pursuit of happiness is not a thing. The pursuit of pleasure is not a thing in that sense. Not to say pleasure is bad. I think I went out of my way to suggest that asceticism, namely this any pleasure is bad and treat your body harshly, that kind of stuff, that's not good either. God made some good things that are meant to be enjoyed, but it's not the purpose of life. If we make the purpose of life pleasure seeking, then we've missed the point of life. And when I say that American culture is pretty thoroughly hedonistic, what I mean is what we do is about pleasure. Even our pursuit of money. Why do people want to make money? Oh, so that they can have more stuff that'll make them happy, so that they can go on more vacations that'll make them happy, so that they can have more blah that'll make them happy. It's all about happiness and it's about pleasure. Why do we go to the movies? Why do we fill our time with stuff that's about like us? Like we can't even go and I want to say we can't use the restroom without using our phones because we're like, what would I do while I was in there? Just sit there like this? Like we can't. Like we need it all the time. And so if you're asking me the ways that I see it in our media consumption, even just saying, hey, we spend 12 hours a day pursuing it. That should be enough to say to you, we probably have a pleasure problem. Like we're pursuing it in a hedonistic way. We've made it about that stuff. So it's how we spend our money. It's the way that we go about everything. A lot of our questions, the main question that I have, unfortunately, is, do I want to do this? Will I enjoy this thing? That is hedonism. That's what it is. A Christian doesn't operate by those questions and those standards. Christians are not asking, am I just going to enjoy it and like it a lot? Am I going to have pleasure from it? They're asking, is this good? Does God want this? Is this best for that person? Those are the questions Christians ask. And it is at odds with hedonism. Can they hear you now?
Okay, I think they can hear me now. Am I on the stream? Yes?
Okay.
Cool. Okay,
Fancy.
so this question is, what's the best way to filter what I watch without completely cutting it out? And so I imagine they're asking, if something has elements that I think Jesus would not be excited about, do I have to cut out that thing completely? Yeah, what's your response to that?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm glad I didn't have to repeat that question because that's like a hard one. That's like a long one to repeat. So let's say there's bad stuff. I already confessed to you guys. And I have to say, like, if this is challenging to you, like, it's challenging to me. I had to write this thing. And I was like, every time I wrote it, I was like, oh, man, like, that's hard. Like, I'm like, that's going to be tough to do. Like, I feel your pain. I'm like, I really like Game of Thrones. I am coming up with so many, like, I'm trying my brain is working overtime to come up with reasons why it's okay for me to do it, right? But I have to also let this other voice speak that pushes back on that thing and says, wait a second, maybe that's not good. Just because you can acknowledge that it's bad, just because you can fast forward the sex scenes, is it still good to fill your heart and your mind with those things? And honestly, I'm not going to tell you what you need to do here in terms of like, oh, well, if it's got a sex scene, then you should cut it out completely. I think you need to know what you struggle with. I think you need to know what you're tempted by. And I think you should probably stay away from things that lean that direction. So, I do think that a lot of these reality shows that we watch, whether it's, I'm going to try to be an equal opportunity offender. If you're this guy that likes UFC because you're like, it's just sport, like it's just sport. Same thing with football too. I'm going to put this out there. At heart, I love football and have watched it for a long time. But the science coming out of football is very clear. People are getting damaged. And I think it says something about us that we are willingly engaging in watching this activity where people throw their bodies at one another, not to injure. That's not the point, but that is what is happening. And so I think we at least need to be critical of whether Jesus would really enjoy that. Would Jesus be there in a stadium on a Sunday cheering on the Cowboys like I would be? And again, I want to be an equal opportunity offender for myself. This is challenging to me. I like football. I want to watch it. And UFC is the same thing. These are people that are hurting each other. Their intent is to submit someone and to harm them. And we should be suspect about that. And if I'm someone that struggles with anger or violence or whatever, perhaps I should be especially careful about avoiding that. And likewise, as a woman, if I am, kind of a bleeding heart, if I'm someone that's just all about romance and, that kind of stuff, and I want to watch The Bachelor because I think that it's really entertaining to have that. There's this hunk, and I don't know why that's a thing, but at any rate, if I'm entertained by something like that, if I'm entertained by the serial killer shows, these kind of stuff, I need to know what at work is in my heart that is drawn to that thing. My suggestion to that person that's like, do I cut this out? I think you have to isolate what in my heart is drawn to this thing. And is it good, bad? Am I feeding something I shouldn't be feeding? Should I be starving this thing or feeding it? Because I genuinely do think there are probably some people that can watch things that are less than wholesome and perhaps not be putting themselves in any danger and still be okay. It's permissible for them. And I think there are probably other people that can't. So my suggestion to that person is you need to prayerfully evaluate your heart and yourself and make a decision that you think is best with what you got. That's it. Is that a decent answer or is that total rubbish? Okay. What's the next one?
Okay, next question is, what are some specific questions that we can ask ourselves to reflect on the state of our hearts when it comes to entertainment?
You said that again. I was not paying attention.
You were drinking the tea, I got you?
I was drinking my tea, and that took up like all my mental space
Okay, cool,
at the
yeah.
time.
How
Like
do you
this
like
is
the hot water?
I'm normally like not thinking right now. Like things have been shut down. Sorry.
Okay, so what are some specific questions that we can ask ourselves to reflect on our hearts when it comes to entertainment?
Well, I kind of mentioned this in this last question about like that question, what in my heart is drawn to this show or to this activity, right? So for me, like I know I've been evaluating ever since I started writing this stuff. I've been like, why do I play Fortnite? Like, why do I like to play so much? Why do I like to spend an hour a day, like, just like at least, just kind of thinking through, like, I don't know, why do I enjoy that, And I think a lot of it is like my brain, I notice like from the time I wake up, my wife will tell you, like most people like wake up groggy-eyed and like sleepy. Like I wake up with like thoughts in my head and things to talk about. And that's just, and I'm the opposite at nighttime. So I'm not saying I'm like that all the time. Like I am a caveman at night, like academic in the morning, caveman at night. But my mind just churns and churns and I'm thinking about stuff all the time. And I've noticed that when I play Fortnite, I can slow that down and hit a reset button. And some people like to take naps. Some people like to watch a show or something like that. It's like that I can hit some reset buttons and be reinvigorated to go do something else. I've noticed that. That's not exonerating the fact that I've spent 52 days doing it. The thing that I think is problematic for us is that we want tension in ourselves to be resolved. We're constantly seeking a resolution to that tension. And the Pharisees did that to an end that made them actually something other than godly, because they were trying to resolve issues that perhaps there's some tensions that should remain in you, maybe questions that should stay in you. So yeah, one good question is just what in my heart is drawing me to this specific activity or show or whatever, and is that something I should feed or not? Other questions could be something along the lines of, would I watch this show while sitting next to Jesus? Like when I think about Survivor, I'm like, I would totally watch it with Jesus and be like, what do you think about like that play? That was crazy. Like that went on. That doesn't mean I'm right. It's just to say I don't think Survivor is like God's show, even though I know it is. I'm just joking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't think it's God's show, but I ask myself questions of like, would Jesus be entertained by that? You know, one of my favorite all-time shows is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And at some point I got too challenged by my own heart on it to say, I could never watch this show with Jesus, even though I think it's hilarious. I could never watch this show with Jesus. I don't think it's a helpful message, even though it's a parody about narcissism. It's a parody about like how ridiculous people could be. And I found it really funny, but I gave it up because I honestly just didn't see it doing good things in my heart. That's it. I think it drove my I might say my rough side. I have a rough side where I joke too roughly sometimes, and I think it drove that. It drove some of the Davis in me a little bit too far. I think maybe if you don't know Davises, we're a little bit from a rough cut. And so I had to say that's probably not helping my soul on that stuff. So anyway, long drawn out answer. There's a lot of good questions you can ask, but that's a handful.
Cool. Next question is, what are some good ways to remain cognizant of our media consumption? So like keep track of...
Okay, you gotta say it one more time. Like just do it like slower and like less with your normal voice. I'm just joking.
What?
I'm just joking. Sorry, I love Jalen, you guys. I just give him a hard time. See, I have not been watching It's Always Sunny, but I still made that joke. See, imagine if I had been watching that. All right,
That's your rough side. Okay, what are some good ways to remain cognizant of our media consumption? So maybe like keeping track of...
Total UTD guy question, 100%. What are some good ways to remain cognizant of our what?
Yeah, COG, of our media consumption.
Of our media consumption. Some good ways to remain cognizant of it. I mean, you've got the screen time on your phone now, right? I don't know why they did that, but they did it, and it can be helpful, right? So you've got that screen time. Another activity that you could do is you could start to actually like write out, like this week, for instance, try it. How like don't try to adjust anything. Maybe just write out how many hours that you actually did it on your phone, on your TV, that kind of stuff, and write out your hours and ask yourself if you're okay with it. Ask God if he's okay with it. But yeah, I would track those things at least a little bit. I'm not saying do that forever, but my suggestion earlier was that we need to have some structure here. We need to have some sort of guidelines for ourselves put in place. Maybe a good start would be just kind of trying to figure out exactly how many hours a day and a week that you're spending doing this. And also that might help those of you that are like, I'm so busy, to be like, oh, actually, I spent 70 hours this week doing entertainment stuff. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I need to think about that. Yeah, what else?
So the next question is about Christian media. Is it possible to use Christian media like in an unhealthy way? Like, can Christian music or Christian movies and things like that be unhealthily consumed?
Can Christian media, like entertainment sources,
can we
be
treat those
unhelpfully
as...
consumed?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. It's driving a message. You know what I mean? It's like you got the whole God's not dead thing, and it's kind of like it paints non-believers as just dumb, evil people who are looking at like to get Christians, that kind of stuff. I'm sorry that I keep harping on that, but I saw part of that movie and I was like, it can drive unrealistic examples of the world. And likewise, I'm going to say something that's maybe a little bit dangerous. There are plenty of non-Christian films, and I mean plenty of non-Christian films that have shown me and given me insight into God's heart and into and beautiful glimpses into God's creation and humanity and all kinds of different things, whether it's society or otherwise. Some of the best filmmakers out there, and maybe the best filmmakers out there, are probably not Christian. And there are some things about the human experience which can be communicated in very beautiful, meaningful ways that can enrich our lives through media. Again, I teach that film and society class. There are some films that have been wonderful, life-giving things to me as I was entertained by them as well. I don't always watch Jason Statham movies or something like that. In fact, I rarely do. But I will just a little. Since we're being vulnerable, I will just tell you guys, I like the Fast and Furious movies. I think they're dope. Sorry, it is what it is. Haters gonna hate. All right, what's that next question?
Okay, yeah. So you definitely touched on this in your talk, but can you list any more ways to use entertainment to serve others and create community?
Other ways to use entertainment to serve others and create community.
Yes.
Do you know who does this super well? She's not watching, probably, but Abby. You guys know Abby Malone? She's like activities woman. She's like, you guys want to like do a class one night where like I just teach you how to dance or something like that? And everyone's like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And they like go over there, just turn on some music and start dancing, and she teaches them some dance moves or whatever. She's like, I think she set up that Sunday afternoon Frisbee group that gets together. Sorry if I'm blowing y'all's spot up. I would never go because I don't like ultimate Frisbee. But there are, I think, ways like that we can really build community and serve people is by just creating something. It can be anything. Like, there are so many things that be entertaining. Do you want to know something that was really entertaining to me when I was in college? Going to Walmart with my friends. Like, it was just funny. You know what I mean? Like, you could just have fun and do, like, just getting groceries together. You could have fun and doing stuff like that. I mean, we underestimate how fun something can be with just other people around with us to laugh about it. And I think the more that we can exchange isolated, self-pleasuring kind of like seeking of entertainment, more that we can limit that, not completely get rid of it, because there's not going to be, it's not always time that you can hang out with people, right? The more we can limit that and replace it with just like, it doesn't have to even be an event. Like I said with Walmart, it doesn't have to be like, well, I've got to hold a dance party now. Like, you can just be like, hey, I'm thinking about just walking on campus. You want to do it? Like, it doesn't, like, if someone asked me that, I'd be like, yeah, I think so. Like, let's just try it. What are you going to do? I don't know. Just walk around. All right, let's do it. Well, I'll just explore campus. Be careful. Don't go to any bad places that you shouldn't go. Like, I know some of y'all be going to restricted areas. Stay away from that. But yeah, other than that, there's that. There's plenty of ways to do it. It would be harder to think of ways that you couldn't do it than it would be to find ways that you can.
Cool. Okay, so we actually had multiple people ask about COVID, saying that
COVID is a pandemic. I'm joking.
yeah, what is it? Tell me about the
They're
virus.
like, what is COVID? I heard you mention it. What exactly are we dealing with here?
Yeah, so basically in this season, people have moved away from relationships and towards entertainment due to social distancing and things like that. Mm-hmm. How would you respond to that challenge that we face?
Yeah. So I fail to see the huge challenge in it, considering we still can, within CDC guidelines and within reason, still get time with one another without, like, I don't know, making out or like holding hands the whole time. Like, you can still be with people and go on walks. You can still throw the Frisbee at a distance. You can still get coffee and talk with one another outside and be, separate in some ways. There's a lot of things that you can do. And I do think it's quite a convenient excuse to be like, well, COVID, Jesus touched a man with leprosy. What does that tell you about his willingness to put people over against some of the fears of our age and time? I'm not saying be unwise. You're not Jesus in that way. You're probably not going to heal somebody of COVID. However, there are plenty of things that we can do, and maybe if you see it as risky, maybe you're just more risk averse than me. It's not that risky to do a lot of things with COVID that are outside, that are distanced. You can still engage with it over Zoom. If you're going to watch a Netflix show, start a Zoom call up and watch a Netflix show and laugh together, Survivor preferably. But there's all kinds of things that you could do. Don't let the same excuses everybody else is making be your excuses too. You could still do it. Could you see, a simple question, let's say Jesus is alive right now. Could you see Jesus being like, well, it's COVID. I'm going to stay in my apartment and hunker down and protect myself and not spend any time with people because, that's just the safest call. I don't see Jesus doing that. And nor do I see him being unwise and flaunting maskless, close distance hangout or something like that. We should be wise, but we shouldn't use it as an excuse to be lazy about spending time with people. Yeah, the world is doing it one way. Let's not. Couple more.
Okay, cool. So you did say that you don't want to prescribe a certain amount of time to spend on entertainment, but how would you recommend someone think through what that amount is for them?
That's a good question. The reason I don't want to prescribe a time is because think about how arbitrary it would be, right? If I was like, hey, 5 hours, like that's it. Like if you would have said that at the beginning of, I don't know, human history, they'd have been like, what? That's absurd. Like, what are you, a king sitting in a palace with all that time to spend on entertainment? So it's a moving target. So that's why I'm loath to say, here's this time commitment thing. I think one of the reasons I think that this is such an easy talk is because there's so much low-hanging fruit. We haven't thought much about it. Maybe instead of saying, hey, it's this many hours, you should say, I need to evaluate how much hours I actually spend, like I said earlier, prayerfully think about that, and then come to some landing spot on it and tinker with it a little bit, right? Like we should have, again, don't resolve the tension. Keep an eye on it. Don't tell yourself it's 6 hours. And as long as I hit that, it's always going to be a success. Maybe there are seasons in your life where more is okay. Maybe there are seasons in your life where you need to cut it down some. But that being said, one of those seasons for me was having kids. I can tell you what I didn't do, and that was play Fortnite whenever they were babies. I was like, I'm going to bed. Now, that being said, I think the important things here is not that we create some rigid rule, but rather that we evaluate ourselves. Remember that whole, that thing that I said on Rethink about being critical by evaluating ourselves? I think a good first step is evaluating how many hours that you actually spend, and then trying to come to some, in your heart and mind as you speak with God about it, like some number that you want to land on, and then reflect on it. Was it too much? Was it too little? What do you need to do? Be thoughtful about it in your own life. Those are the only guidelines I'd feel comfortable giving.
Cool.
Maybe like 2 more.
Okay. So this next question is about Sabbath and entertainment. So this person, I guess, finds themselves engaging more in entertainment than in work. And so what does it look like for them to rest, to take Sabbath?
So during their Sabbath, they engage more in entertainment than than work.
I guess the question is specifically, what does Sabbath mean for us in a culture of little work? But I guess I interpret that as,
I think they're assuming that we just work less, and so maybe Sabbath is not as necessary. Maybe that's kind of what they're going for. Does that sound like an overgeneralization?
yes.
Okay.
Or no, not over. No, that sounds accurate.
You think that sounds right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was like, all right, how dare you? So yeah, I mean, I think this idea of like we don't need rest because we don't work, in the fields 120 hours a week is probably wrong. But rather, I think maybe the question should be something along the lines of, what does Sabbath look like for God's people? What should we be doing about Sabbath? And I think we can take some cues from Scripture on that. I think emphasis and attention should be spent on time with people. I think that an emphasis and attention should not, it's not as if God in the Scripture is like, selfishness is bad, don't focus on yourself all the time, that kind of stuff. But with Sabbath, it's all about you, friend. Like, however you rest, whatever's most important for you, do that. I don't think God's like giving you a pass to be selfish on Sabbath. I think what he's saying is, on Sabbath, we're meant to stop from our normal rhythm of being and doing, step out of that rhythm of being and doing, and reflect and think and spend time with people and do stuff differently. There's actually an article on our website called Rethinking Rest. Yeah, maybe. We love that word, rethinking. But I think it's called Rethinking Rest or something like that. Rest Redefined. Oh, way to go, Jalen. There's an article on our website called Rest Redefined where we talk about Sabbath a little bit more and thinking through that. So if you want to go on anyfocus.org, the resources, articles, it's there. It's called Rest Redefined. Rest, Redefined. And so I don't even know if that's proper grammar, but either way, that can kind of give you some more insight into that. I don't think we're meant to treat Sabbath as this like hard and fast thing. However, I do think that Sabbath is God made it for us for a reason, and that we should think through it, and that we should be really purposeful about what that should look like. And you have to learn how to do it. So that can probably help give. That's kind of a punt to say read this article, but it's a little bit too hard. You could do a whole piece of theology about Sabbath for sure, and then some. Okay, one more, last one.
Okay, last question.
Better be good.
What are some resources that you would recommend for someone to think about this further?
So yeah, dude, here's what stinks. Like I said, I looked for a lot of resources on this to think about it, and there are not a lot of good ones. And it's really difficult to find them. I spent a lot of hours looking for healthy articles, or not healthy, but helpful articles written by scholars or by people who knew what they were talking about, rather than just kind of Joe Schmo that's like, entertainment's bad. And it's really hard to find this stuff. I wish I could be like, oh, this article, I put my sources, here for you guys to be thinking about that. The books that I had picked up and started reading, I was halfway through and I was like, you know what? I don't think this is super helpful. Thanks a lot, Daria, by the way. She recommended one of those. So yeah. So, there's probably some good literature out there. And I would encourage you guys, if you find something that you think is really helpful, share that with a focus pastor so that maybe we can help kind of spread that around. I did ask John Stackhouse Jr. to write a book about it, and he acted like that would be interesting. So maybe we could just goad him into writing a book for us about it. But yeah, there are not a lot of good resources. There are numerous articles on Christianity Today that I'll talk about it that can be helpful for at least priming the pump. But I don't think you're going to come to like some great new conclusion there, either. Yeah. Okay. Well, it is now 7:30. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Pizza Theology. Thanks for hanging in there for these 2.5 hours. I appreciate you guys listening and watching, and I hope that it's a blessing to you guys moving forward. You guys have a great night.